If you're like me and have found this pandemic and its many, many lockdowns to be the perfect time to dive headfirst into film photography, or maybe you've been shooting film since before it was cool, back when freedom was legal, you've probably explored the multitude of ways to convert your analog shots to digital. Having extensively tested the flatbed method to a frustrating and fruitless end, I was keen to switch to the camera plus macro lens method that's been recommended to me by so many photographers, both on and off of the podcast. After scouring the market, I discovered a fantastic, multi-format, high-quality, cost-effective solution for securing my film and diffusing the light underneath it, allowing me to photograph it effectively. Its frame, range of interchangeable gates, and light diffuser make it possible to digitally photograph your film quickly and, most importantly to me, to a high standard. It allows you to scan 35mm, 120 and even 4x5. Visit pixel-later.com, that's pixl-latr.com to find out more and get your own. Also check them out on Instagram, tell them that I sent you, and a massive thanks to Pixelator for supporting the podcast. Today is actually a bit of a blessed day because I woke up this morning and opened up my Instagram like most people do before their eyes are even functioning properly. And after scrolling through for a bit, I noticed something had changed. And I don't know if this has changed all the way over in Australia or anywhere else in the world, but I do know for sure that it's changed in England. They are no longer showing the number of likes on posts. So I get the feeling a lot of ill-earned careers are about to disappear as a result of the effects of being an influencer being decreased by that happening. I'm very happy about that. People can start to just value things based on what they think of it and not look for the metric underneath. That's my whinge for the whole podcast out of the way. I'm very excited about the fact that that's changed. But speaking of Instagram, something happened this week that is a very big indictment of the problems with things like YouTube and the algorithm they have. One of the complaints I've had in the past with YouTube is the fact that they just tend to push up the same people over and over again, and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer in a sense of sort of notoriety and views and so on. And I got followed this week by a photographer on Instagram. And as I often do, especially with a lot of downtime during a pandemic, I go and have a look through the people that have followed me. I'm always looking for new work to enjoy. And I come across a wonderful photographer. And as a bit of omnipotence, I was at the point of looking for some peel apart Polaroids. This person shot some peel apart Polaroids and they had a YouTube channel. So I ended up going down a whole rabbit hole, finding an amazing photographer, a really enjoyable YouTube channel with not enough views and not enough subscribers. So we're going to work on that at the end of this. Darren, it's so wonderful to talk to you, to have you online. It feels like a whirlwind romance. It's happened in the space of about 72 hours from me first realizing you exist to here we are talking. Let's start off with how you got into photography. So what was it that made you want to pick up a camera in the first place?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me on. First thing that made me want to pick up a camera, I didn't really take photos or have any interest in like photography until I was about 22. And I'm 30 now, for those who don't know me, obviously. But about 8 years ago, I'd sort of like always played music and stuff and always had like that sort of creative flair about me, but I just never really went into photography so much. But I was about 22 years old and my sister was an air hostess. And she sort of short notice said to me, do you want to go to New York? I'm about to quit my job and we can go for really cheap. We may as well just go and enjoy it and before I quit and we don't have the cheap tickets anymore. So at a really short notice, we flew over to New York and I didn't even own a camera or anything like that. So I just went to like the local CVS on the corner and I bought a couple of like Kodak disposable cameras. And that's all I'd ever really known as well, because like, you know, I was born in the 90s and if I was ever to take photos before that, my mum would just give me a disposable camera to take or whatever. So I'd never really learned or knew too much about digital photography or anything like that. And I also didn't want to spend any money, and the disposables were like $15 for two or something. Right. Just went around, took photos on that trip, and just really kind of enjoyed it. But I didn't sort of go, I want to be a photographer now. I just sort of enjoyed that. And I didn't even pay much mind to the fact that it was shooting on film or anything like that. People weren't even really talking that much about shooting film back then. And then I came home and I just kind of kept shooting photos. So I bought a few more like disposables, and then a friend of mine who was like into photography, I messaged him and I was like, hey, have you got a camera maybe that I can buy? And he gave me an Olympus MJU2 or Mu2, whatever they call them, which are now like, these cult classic sort of cameras. And he sold it to me for $80. And about a year later, I went traveling again. I went back to New York and around America a bunch. I just took that film camera with me, and this time just a bunch of rolls of film, and shot heaps of photos. And then basically I just came back and I just kept doing it. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. People started noticing, I guess, my photography, but I wasn't even at that point calling it photography. I was just taking pictures. And then people sort of started asking me to take pictures of them and like of their bands and stuff, and offering to give me money for it. And then, it just kind of snowballed from there. I can keep going, but that's the short version.
Well, it's interesting. I'm seeing more and more people, and I guess it's more to do with my exposure through doing the podcast than maybe reality, I guess. It's just what I'm seeing of it. But it feels like more and more people, especially at a younger age, are finding photography through film as opposed to through digital. And obviously, younger people tend to have less money. The money tends to come when you don't have the time. That's sort of the irony of life. But film photography is a much more expensive endeavor in the long run than digital is, because memory cards versus cost of repeated rolls of film. What is it that you prefer about film over digital, especially given sort of the route that you took?
Well, yeah, again, it wasn't like I didn't decide to shoot film. It just was the first thing that I picked up, I guess. And also, like I said, I was never like, I'm going to be a photographer. So I didn't want to, spend an amount of money on like a decent digital camera or something like that. I was like not really that interested in becoming like a professional at that point. But then, film, like, I guess since then, I've kind of done it all backwards. Like most photographers and like the people I've listened to on this podcast often are like, oh, I shot digital and I knew the ins and outs of digital photography and video and all that sort of stuff. And then, a year ago I picked up film and now I shoot film. But for me, it's kind of always been film, and I don't know, like I actually don't even really know much about digital photography. And I tried, so I quit my job when I was about 25 to go to university and study photography because I just was in a bit of a dead end job and a career I didn't like. And I was like, oh, look, I'm going to have a go at this. And I went to university, and they start you off on film in your first few units and that sort of thing. And then next thing I know, they're giving us digital cameras and Canon 5Ds and all that sort of stuff. And for me, I was like, oh, it makes more sense, I guess, to switch to digital. It's like, it's more cost effective and that sort of thing. And I was trying to shoot digital and I just wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And I don't really know like why that is. Like, I don't have any issue with people shooting digital. Photos a photo at the end of the day. But
well, if I could jump in there, do you mean that you weren't getting what you wanted from it in terms of the final result or the process itself?
Both. I didn't like, one of the first things I noticed was when you were working with someone and they asked to see the photo mid-shoot. And I was kind of like, we're still shooting. And then it's a distraction, I think, that screen on the back of the camera. And then from there, I would put the SD card in the computer and I've got like 500 photos that I have to go through. And I was like, I don't like, and you might be two next to each other and they're almost exactly the same, but someone's moved their eye like an inch or like a millimeter, I should say. And it's like, oh, which one's better? And then I'm overthinking it. And I also don't like sitting on the computer all that much. So then like the editing time is longer with digital. So there was just a bunch of things but in my head, I was like, if I want to be a professional, I have to learn or move to digital because that's what people do. At the time, we're going back like 5 years or so now, but eventually I just kind of caved and was like, nah, I just don't like shooting digital, and I just went back to film, even though it was expensive and it's more a drawn out process, and you end up with less photos. But yeah, I don't know. I just never really turned back, and that was weird because in the last 5 years, film has become this huge thing again. So I guess maybe I feel more validated now. I don't know.
Well, this is something where you feel like you had your own, I guess, little corner of the world where you were the one shooting film and everyone was moving more and more towards digital. And this is exactly how I would see it. And it's purely down to probably how petty I am. But the second that it becomes popular, I'm almost like, oh, maybe I don't want to do this anymore now, because I don't want it to be like I'm doing it because it's popular. I want to, I don't know. I feel like if I was shooting film for a few years and then, it was gradually receding and no one was interested, and then all of a sudden it had this big boom, like you say, it has had in the last 3, 4, 5 years. I would almost be like, well, now, almost like a hipster, I guess. I don't want to say that, but I feel like I would be. I'd be a bit like, well, now I don't want to do it because everyone else is doing it.
Yeah, I have sort of thought that at some points, but also like I don't really know how else to do it. So it's kind of like my only option. I even with I've started this YouTube channel, and like I had to go and buy a digital camera to even make the YouTube channel because I didn't own one. And I just get it, and I'm like, there's so many buttons and there's so many settings and all this shit that I don't know what it is. So I just literally my YouTube production is so low because I don't really know or care how to make my digital production amazing or whatever. It'd be cool in the future maybe, but I'm never sitting there. I'm like, oh, I'm going to sit down and learn about my digital video camera or whatever. So I had to go out and buy a digital camera for the YouTube stuff. And I did not buy an expensive one or anything like that. And I'm just sort of making do with what I have. But yeah, no, sorry. On the hipster sort of side of things, no, I'm not. I think it's cool to see people getting back into film, or into film for the first time, I should say, because it seems to be a lot more of the younger crew. But I don't take it all that seriously. I know fads come and go, as bad as that sounds. I don't really think there is an interest in film photography at the minute so much as there is an interest in telling your friends that you shoot film. I don't know, or just the aesthetic of the photo, rather than people aren't buying SLRs, people are buying point and shoots. They're not interested in learning about shutter speeds and aperture and all that sort of stuff. They just want to have the cool Instagram picture that they shot on the point and shoot. So I don't know if I see it as much of an interest in film photography so much as just taking photos on film, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Well, I guess that kind of, something I've been trying to sort of swill around in my head for a while and ask various people about is just, it feels like if you've got this huge resurgence of something, that it seems to be, I think especially I'm a digital photographer in essence. I do shoot film, but I'm no way a film photographer. I'm very much a digital photographer. It's what I use for my work and so on. The digital side of things has become incredibly stale. And that's because for so long they were using sales techniques that whilst they worked, but the second that they stopped working, they were really damaging for the longevity of creating that buzz around the market. Things like megapixels, things like the noise in images and so on. People actually should be excited about the lenses and about, how you're going to use the camera, and not so much about stupid numbers that don't really factor into an end product, especially not for people that aren't photographers themselves. And it feels weird to me that the real buzz in photography at the moment is around film. And I agree with you. I feel like a significant portion of that, well into the majority, is around people that want to say they shoot film as opposed to, the actual process of shooting film. But I find it very strange that companies aren't capitalizing on film's resurgence. We've seen Fuji have pulled a film stock out of production, and I understand that that's for a variety of reasons, although I believe that that's all a bit of a facade, and it's actually just because it wasn't particularly popular and it wasn't cheap to produce. I don't think businesses make business decisions based on anything other than business. So I get the impression that what happened there was more down to money than anything else, regardless of what they've said. But why aren't companies capitalizing? Why aren't we seeing, new film cameras being touted by the likes of Canon, who obviously pioneered so many great ones in the past? Why is it just being ignored by the commercial side of things, do you think?
I've thought about that actually. And I was kind of like, at first as well, I was like, they should bring out at least a new point and shoot, like Olympus or something like that, just to like sort of fill this market. But then I really thought about it and I was like, all these people that seem to want to shoot 35mm photos or whatever at the minute, they're all buying these secondhand old point and shoots that are like, in Australian dollars, they're like $100. And if you go back to like the cost of, say one of the Olympus Muse or something when they first came out, and then also bring into account like inflation, that sort of thing, I don't think that those companies would be able to produce like a new point and shoot and sell it for $100. You know what I mean? Like, I think that they would have to put a price mark on them of like maybe $500 or something like that. And I reckon the market and the people that are like wanting to shoot those photos would probably still just buy the $100 secondhand point and shoot. I don't think they would invest the money in that. I don't know. That's what I put it down to. I was like, why are people not producing new cameras? But you do see like, you've got like Film Never Die and like, I think Ilford just bought one out. They're bringing out these like essentially reloadable, disposable cameras,
right.
Single fixed focus lens things or whatever. They're definitely nowhere near like, your Contaxes or whatever, the actual autofocus systems. But I guess they are producing new film cameras kinda, but they're just not like anything special. But I just think if a company like Olympus or Fuji or something produced a new sophisticated film camera, people would still buy vintage gear because it's cheaper.
Right. Well, I mean, that makes total sense. It's anytime you get a market like this, it feels like there's going to be people that have ample amounts of excess income, and the status of it and so on will drive them to spend a lot of money. I mean, people are spending copious amounts of money on film and developing and, the whole process of scanning and everything for, like you say, point and shoot shots. So the camera might cost, $100 or, £100 or whatever. But at the end of the day, you're spending ample amounts more money anyway because of the process. So it feels like there is, if it's marketed correctly, and I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that are smart enough to do it, I feel like there is room for this to be commercialized a little bit more. And I know that sounds like something that I shouldn't really say because I shouldn't want big companies to make more money. And I know everyone has to hate the rich while they constantly try and become rich themselves, and the ultimate irony of how stupid people have become. But it does feel like there's room for more cameras to be made, because I had a conversation a while back with another wonderful film photographer and YouTuber, Bray Hunziker, and I said to him, are we not more likely to... We're more likely to run out of cameras before we run out of film. For the longest time, we've all been worried about film, disappearing. But actually, especially with people, and I really shouldn't say this unironically, I am actually sat next to a huge wall full of cameras. But with people hoarding cameras, with cameras that break and there's no one around to fix them and so on, the cameras are going to disappear before the film does. It just feels like maybe there's space for Canon to step in and reboot the EOS 3 or something like that, Olympus, like you say, to come out of a point and shoot. There would actually be quite a decent amount of money in there. And I think like now's the time to capitalize on it.
Yeah, well, I thought like even going back like 2 or so years ago when things started to pick up, I was thinking that these companies might bring one out. It's kind of weird to have not seen that, you know what I mean? And then, and then see companies like Fuji that are like discontinuing things as well. It's strange. Like even, companies like Kodak are doing really well at the minute as well. And I'm like, maybe they could, they used to make cameras, but who knows? I guess maybe I'm not that worried about it because I've also got a wall full of cameras that I can rely on. I've like sold cameras over the years and then realizing like now what those cameras have become worth. And so about a year ago, I was like, that's it. Like I'm not selling any of my gear. Like, so all my gear is just stacking up because I was like, I sold a Contax G1 for not much. And then looking at the cost of them now, I'm like, wow, like I kind of really wish that I hung on to that one.
Well, it's going to become like sports cars, right? It's going to become like classic cars where people will buy them as an investment. You'll have people with a Pentax 6.7 in the garage just in case, the banks fail again and it's their way out.
Pay for groceries with it. Yeah, no, it's crazy how expensive some stuff has gotten. But then at the same time, there is still like stuff that I look at and I'm like, that's pretty cheap for what it is. And I think it will eventually become more expensive. But yeah, no, I bought a bunch of my stuff like about 5 or so years ago, and the prices were pretty good. But even at the time then, I thought they were too high. And then now they're just like crazy high. My Olympus like MJU or whatever I was telling you about before that I bought for $80 got stolen out of my car. And then I was like, well, I don't really want to buy another one for $500. Like It's just not worth it.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredibly frustrating. And I guess the other side of it, if we go away from the commercialization of it, something as you're outside of the US, I feel like you'll probably understand where I'm coming from here. You've probably spent the last 12 months on social media swiping through endless amounts of people from America explaining social responsibility to the rest of the world like we didn't have it already going for us. And there seems to be this big push lately on like what you can do to help a community or what you can do to help a cause or what you can do to help, something like, there's good sides to it, like the plastic in the ocean and so on. And then there's the other sides of it where people just start to find trivial stuff to become experts on because it's always nice to be seen as an expert. A lot of social responsibility. Is there a social responsibility from the film community in the sense of, maintaining and progressing it? Maybe like not having a wall full of cameras again. I think we're both probably have to be quite sheepish about that. But is there a responsibility in terms of, not, I don't even know how it could manifest, but like not being a dick about it? Because I think if the general consensus is that it's like an elitist thing, it's going to push more people away from it. And really, it should be about maintaining it as much as possible. YouTubers that post new cameras that they've bought off of eBay every week, they always drive up a huge surge of interest in that camera. So the prices go through the roof and then the cameras disappear because people are suddenly searching for a camera they hadn't heard of before the last YouTube video came out. Is there like a responsibility there on behalf of the community for us to not kind of shit on our own doorstep, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. And I think like, you see it as well with like film stocks and that sort of stuff. Like recently the whole Fuji Pro or whatever that got discontinued. I can't even remember the name, but as soon as it got discontinued, the prices just went insane, like scalping concert tickets or something. But generally, like, I don't really engage too much. I don't really know what's going on in like America and in the UK and that sort of thing. But in Australia, like people are generally pretty cool. Like they just sell stuff for what it's worth. And like I said, with that FP100 that I picked up, the guy was like really nice about it and was kind of like, I just want someone to get some use out of it. The Australian sort of film community is like really, really supportive. And when it comes to like the big names on YouTube and all that sort of stuff, I don't know. It just seems like money's gotten involved and it's a bit messy. But yeah, I don't know. Like I'm a self-confessed person that like I like live under an internet rock. I really don't know what's going on in the world, and I don't like to. So I work I work part-time in IT. Strangely, because I really dislike computers and technology, but there's a long story about that. But basically, that was a career I went into after I finished school because I didn't know what to do, and my parents were like, "We have to do something." And I ended up doing that full time, and then now I just do it like a couple of days a week just to sort of pay the rent and that sort of stuff.
Right.
But once I've sort of clocked off those 2 or 3 days that I'm on a computer for work, I just don't want to be on a computer anymore. So I don't like even starting a YouTube channel, I was a bit wary of it because I was like, I'll have to go on and like might have to like reply to comments and like all that sort of stuff. Because I don't want to be like a dick and like not if someone watches my video and like comments and stuff, I don't want to like just ignore it and that sort of thing. So like wake up in the morning, I like go on and make sure like I've replied to stuff and all that sort of thing. But I guess that comes back to shooting film again as well. Is like there's just like the power could go out or whatever, and I could still take photos, But yeah, in terms of social responsibility, I think as long as just everyone sort of stops doing shit like selling film stocks that are discontinued for like crazy amounts and all that sort of stuff, and just tries to hype each other up like you're doing with the podcast, which is sick. Like, it's really cool to see. I was listening to a bunch of them now, but just finding out about people that I've never heard of before. Like you said, the algorithm can kind of bury a lot of people. So yeah, stuff like that's super positive as well.
Well, I feel like you've got a bunch of people that, regardless of the medium, whether it's digital or film, they're excited by photographers. They're excited by work of other photographers. They're excited by just photography in general, the process, the final product. They like sharing stuff. They like I'm hugely excited about finding new photographers. It's something that it's just something that whenever I find someone new whose work I can obsess over, it feels like I get the same sort of level of satisfaction that I think people get from a new purchase, if that makes sense. Like, rather than having to spend the money to feel, validated in like, oh, my pictures need to be better, therefore I'll go buy a new lens. I actually feel like when I find a new influence, that's something that really boosts me in mood and it makes me want to go out and shoot. It makes me want to take part more. With yourself, what were the influences when you first started and what are they now? Are they all photography related? Are you a big fan of any particular photographers, or do you find your influence outside?
I don't know. In terms of like influence, like I said, I used to always, well, I still do, but I've played music like my whole life. So sometimes like it can even just come down to like a song or an album or something like that might get me really like jazzed up for the day. And then I'm like, okay, now I want to go and take photos. So it's not even like a direct sort of visual inspiration or anything like that. But photography wise, there's obviously like the greats. Like, I'm literally just looking at my shelf now and I've got like a Ryan McGinley book, David Lynch book, Richard Miserak, landscape photographer, even though I don't even really take landscape photos. But one of the biggest, I guess, moments for me photography wise was in New York, of all places, an inspirational place. But I was there on my own and I just went into like this little gallery that was being held somewhere in like the Midtown. It was in like an old police precinct, and every cell, like every jail cell or whatever, was a different artist's space. And this was a point, like I said, like I was just taking photos because I was traveling. I wasn't trying to be a photographer or anything. And then I went into this little room and it was blacked out. It's like a dark room. And there was little red torches hanging from the ceiling and all the prints were up on the wall, and you could walk around and shine the red torch onto the prints to have a look at them. And there was a guy in there and his name was Jesper Haynes. So it's Jesper and then Heynes. Mm-hmm. And he was selling photo books. And I just started chatting with him and had a look at his book. And he was this guy, and like, I still don't think he's like a household name by any means, but he was a friend of like Andy Warhol's, and he lived, through sort of like the AIDS epidemic in New York City and that sort of thing. And he'd photographed kind of 20 years of living in the same apartment and the people coming and people going and all that sort of stuff. And I bought a copy of his book and he signed it for me and we had a chat. And that, I think, was like a bit of a tipping point for me, where I was like, hang on, like maybe this interest in photography is more than just, casually taking photos. So if I could think back to just one inspirational sort of moment, that was definitely one of them. On the day to day, it can be anything from a film, from going for a walk to the beach to listening to a record. It could be anything. I don't, as bad as it sounds, get a lot out of looking at other people's photos, like photography wise. Like I can look at them and appreciate them, but I don't look at them and go like, oh, that makes me want to take a photo. I don't know why, but it just doesn't. Films do it. Films definitely do it to me. Yeah. But photos, not so much. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned photo books there, and I'm on a bit of a push at the moment to sort of get more myself. I've got a couple coming very soon in the post from a previous podcast guest, Eli Warren. I'm extremely excited about them arriving. I feel like photo books are a little bit overlooked now because everything's on a screen, everything's in your pocket, everything's for free. I do actually think there's something much more enjoyable about a tangible book in your hands, something you can go back to, you get a feel for it, it's tactile. Am I being a little bit too philosophical about books being important compared to what they are on screen?
No, I have heaps of books. I think books are extremely important. And that's like something that, like, I bought that first book, like I was telling that story, but once I got to university and they were, I was studying photography, it was always books, and it was always go to the library and get books, bring the books into class, open the books, let's look at the books. Like, it's always about the hard copies of the photos. Like, it's really hard for me and like frustrating for me when I'll do a shoot or something and I'll come home and I'll scan the negatives after they've been developed and it's on my big computer screen and it's big and it's large and whatever. And then it's consumed solely on like people's phones.
Yeah.
It would be awesome if we were still looking at prints, but it's just not really the way it is anymore. But I think like for photographers and for artists to produce bodies of work and books and that sort of thing, like I had to make I did make a book for my grad project for university, and like so I spent a year studying in the US as well, in Washington State. So you mentioned Bray, his YouTube channel brings up a lot of sort of memories for me being over there, but I ended up shooting like a huge body of work while I was there and then putting that into a book. But being shitty at Instagram and the internet like I am, it doesn't say that anywhere on my page. But yeah, no, so books are super important, tangible copies of photos, that sort of thing. But yeah, I've got a book in front of me right now and it's Miles Aldridge. And Miles Aldridge is a really big sort of, I don't want to say inspiration because I don't shoot anything like his, but his work's incredible, and like just he sort of builds entire sets for his shoots, and that's something that I'd like to work sort of towards in the future, but can't really afford to have a studio at the minute.
Well, you've mentioned music a couple of times, and I previously in one of my past lives was a musician of some description. What's interesting to me about music is the way that it's a very reactive thing. So when you're playing music by yourself, you're writing music in your own space on your own, it can be very sterile and you can kind of end up going down the same 3 or 4 channels over and over again, not really producing anything new and interesting. But if you put that same musician in a situation where they're playing with someone else, they instantly change in terms of their own style. Things start to develop, they start to blossom really quickly. I always feel like jam sessions are very similar to war in the sense that like every time there's been like a world war or any kind of major conflict, technology and medicine and everything just goes through the roof. It all gets brought up because it has to, because it's, it's a war. Everyone's trying to one up the other, and any advancements in technology and so on go through the roof. And I feel like when you put musicians in a room together, you get this weird similarity in the sense that they start finding extra gears they didn't know they had. They start reacting off of what the other person's doing. They find different avenues of their own voice and so on. It's a wonderful experience. And photography is sort of similar, but because there's so many different genres and I find landscape to be one of the hardest for me to mentally kind of get myself into, because I don't feel like there's anything reactive. You go to a place, the place looks nice, you wait till the light's good, you take a picture, that was the place. And it feels like there's not much reciprocation. Maybe just entirely down to the way that I look at it. But when you photograph people, I've worked with people who look fantastic and I've had no connection with at all. And it's very hard for me to find that extra gear to really make my work look as good as I want it to look. And then on the other side, there's been people who maybe I wouldn't have picked out of a crowd if I was going entirely off of what I see on social media. But the connection and the way that you work off each other produces fantastic images. Am I kind of describing how you feel about that? That like there are people you work with when you're photographing people that really bring out something different from you?
Yeah. Like I'd say in like the last sort of 12 months, obviously pandemic and all that sort of stuff, haven't been working with anyone really new. Like, well, it's weird because so my YouTube channel, I spend a lot of time just shooting photos of my girlfriend, but mainly because I don't want the first time I work with a new person to be saying to them, hey, I'm going to be filming you as well as taking photos of you. So it's just easier to use or to work with my girlfriend. Shout out to Anya. And she helps me with filming and that sort of stuff. And then, when it comes to working with like new people, I often just find like the first time I shoot with a new model or a new musician or something like that, it's okay, but the thing that is in my head is like the next shoot's definitely going to be good. I think it's just because you've like spent time around that person, like got to know that person a little bit. And then once that's been done, you're just a little bit like more comfortable for the next shoot that you do. It obviously like totally depends what you're getting from the person that you're shooting and the person that you're working with. And it is a collaboration most of the time. And, usually it depends. It depends if someone's like, contacted you saying this is specifically what we need and here's a brief and so on and so on. But if it's something where you're just like collaborating with a model, giving them prints in order for them to model for you and that sort of thing, then you just sort of work on your concept and it just comes down to, the sort of energy that you have with that person on the day. And sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not that good, but you've got to just sort of work with what you've got. But
what makes a good model for you?
What makes a good model? I think people that are just kind of like open to trying things. Like for me, like, I don't know, I'm like a bit self-conscious about it when I work with people because I feel like photography, when you're doing a photo shoot with a model, for example, they think that they show up and they sort of give you that their specific looks or whatever it is that they do, looking down the barrel of the lens and you just snap away. But I just feel like, and because I work with my girlfriend Anya a bunch and she shoots digital. So we might go to a shoot and we'll be working with someone and she would just be firing shots. And then I'll sort of go to take my photo and I've got medium format 6:7 with 10 photos in it. And I'm sort of stepping around and I'm looking around and I'm thinking and I'm asking people to stand there and then I'm not taking a photo and then I'm moving around and all that sort of stuff. I just work like super slowly and meticulously. But obviously, again, that comes back to shooting with film. But that makes me feel a little bit self-conscious. So I guess like for me, a good model is someone that can just kind of be a little bit patient with me in that aspect and work with me, on what I'm trying to get out of that photo, because I kind of like, I these days I'll go to a shoot. I might only shoot like 1 max 2 rolls of medium format. So that's like 20 photos. So I just want to make sure that hit rate is like really high and that I go home and every photo that I scan or almost all the photos I scan are good, so for that, I just need patient models who will be malleable and open to ideas.
Well, I've heard before that the secret to a good actor or actress is not being afraid to get it wrong, because obviously you guard yourself then and you're more restrictive and you're less open to pushing things a little bit further. And I feel like that's a really strong point, because I feel like a lot of people that want to have their photo taken, especially now that everyone's taking their own photo more than they're being photographed, with sort of selfie culture being a big deal. A lot of people will settle for a shoot of 5 out of 10 shots, middle of the road. They're good. They're not great. They're not bad. They're just good shots. They have their same 3 or 4 expressions, and that's probably being generous in some cases. But actually, the ones that are okay with getting a few 2 out of 10 shots usually also end up with a few 8 out of 10s. And I feel like maybe people are too excited to have. This is very much a sort of a self-review here. I've been way too safe in the past as well. And I've been at a point where I'm like more focused on consistency than doing something that I really feel is the next step forwards. Like I'm kind of always trying to, and I think it's down to kind of almost an OCD level with my work, that I'm kind of worried about getting the 8 out of 10 shot, because I know if I play it safe, I can walk away with a 5 or a 6 out of 10, and I don't have to worry about the ones that look like a 2 out of 10.
Yeah.
Is that kind of consistency in your work something that you worry about on shoot, or are you just not a psychopath like me and you actually enjoy the process?
It's interesting. You said before, you said a good actor, and I was like, to me, like at the risk of sounding like a pretentious dickhead, when I do a shoot, like it is almost like the model is an actor, you know what I mean? And the shoot is almost like a film set. Like for me, I don't, like I'll be watching a film and sometimes, you know, say I'll pause it and I'll walk away and I come back and I'm like, that frame is incredible. Like it's a still, you know what I mean? And when I'm shooting, I quite often am trying to catch like these stills that almost look like they're a scene out of something where there's a storyline behind it and so on. But that's a hard thing to achieve with a model as well, because again, people think that models usually, I guess, will come and they'll look down the barrel of the lens, and you watch a film, you never see the actor staring into the lens. You know what I mean? Like, so to me, it kind of like, I try to shoot people without them looking directly at me. But, you know, if I'm not super comfortable with someone, then I struggle to kind of push them into that direction. And then I'll end up with, you know, a bunch of photos that I'm never going to use. But, you know, you do have to give people what they've come for as well, especially if they're giving you their time and they, you know, they need to get the certain shots that they want to get as well. So, yeah, it is collaborative. But no, in terms of like you said, just being like really meticulous and trying to plan things, I literally like, I'll rock into a shoot, and if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. If it's good, it's good. And if it's shit, then oh well, I don't know. We'll try again next time. I'm not, too fussed on that. My biggest perfectionist issue is that I just like never post anything online because like I overthink it and I just end up like I think I started posting stuff like 2 days ago, but I hadn't posted anything since like August last year because I'll be like, oh, maybe I'll post this photo, and then I'll be like, nah, maybe it's shit. Like I'm very like critical of my own work, but you know, if I do a shoot and I don't get a good hit rate of photos, I'm not like upset about it. It's whatever.
Well, something I've sort of heard from various photographers at all different levels in the past is that idea of like your Instagram or whatever is your branding, and like everything you put out has to be put out at certain times, and you know, you have to use certain hashtags, and you have to be very particular about what order you put stuff out in, and so on and so forth. And I have a personal rule, which is if someone mentions algorithm unironically as like a point of conversation, I tend to switch off completely, because like if you're a creative and your main focus is something like trying to game the algorithm, you know, I don't know what it is about me as a person, but I just find that to be so uninteresting and so tedious. And I'd rather talk about process than just trying to generate a bigger number, which I'm again going to reiterate, I'm really glad they've taken away from underneath the photos.
The number of likes got taken away in Australia like, 6 months ago, maybe more.
Well, I feel cheated now.
Yeah. I thought that everyone had that. I don't care about likes or anything like that. Like in my YouTube channel was like, I don't know. I think it's hell crap, but like, I think it's just funny, like how bad my production is. And like, I'm a weirdly shy person, but like, I'm quite a social person, but I'm quite a shy person, but I can't like at university, if I had to stand up in front of the class and talk, like I would shit myself. But if I was sat back down with those exact same people, I could talk to them just fine. But it's super weird because I started this YouTube channel and I'm like trying to talk to a camera, which is so like not good for me. Like I was like hell struggle with it. So yeah, when it comes to like Instagram and YouTube and all that sort of stuff, I like post and ghost. So I like post stuff and then I like bail. And then when I come back on, I don't check like likes or comments or anything like that. But on YouTube, I check comments because I'm trying to like be nice and like reply to people. But with like Instagram and that sort of thing, like I accepted like, especially considering where I live, like I live so this is like the most isolated capital city in the world. There's very slim to no chance that I'm going to make a career out of being a film photographer here. So like, I don't feel any kind of pressure to be like, oh, I need to cheat the algorithm or all that sort of crap. I'm just going to do what I do. And like, I work part-time, I make money, I can pay my rent. I don't have that like stress having to hustle or anything like that. And at first, when I like studied and when I graduated and all that sort of stuff, I thought that's what I would do, that I'd like really hustle and I want to be a full-time photographer and I want that to be my main income and stuff. But now I'm just kind of like, I'd rather just chill. Hey, like I'll just work a couple of days at my old career and then I can just do what I want in that other time. And if a job comes up that I like, I'll take it. And if a job comes up that I don't like, I don't have to take it because it's not my my bread and butter money, you know? So yeah, I'm not too fussed about all the Instagram and the YouTube channel. I started just because I was kind of like, I'd go to look for a certain video or I'd go to research a certain topic or something. And if I couldn't really find anything about it, and like, especially when it comes to like the peel apart film stuff, that was when I was like, oh, like I'm going to do this. I'm going to try this at home on my own time. So maybe I should like put it online, you know, maybe I should like show people because no one else seems to be doing it. And I'm going to do it anyway. But yeah, sorry, I'm rambling.
No, you're good. I mean, you mentioned like being in an isolated area and obviously that affecting the possibility of you making a career out of it. And I've mentioned before on the podcast about culture hubs. Obviously, America has two, generally speaking, one major one. And then, you know, California, LA, Hollywood tends to be the main one, and New York being, depending on who you ask, the secondary one or an equal. In England, we have London, and it doesn't seem to matter where you are in England. Everybody says they're from London when they work in a creative field, because I guess they're only a train ride away and they can just pretend. And for some reason, being from London or being based in London is somehow influential to the quality of the work that you produce. I'm not really sure I understand the point of that in any way, shape or form. And obviously, like you said, in Australia, you're in quite an isolated spot. Are we, with the internet and with, you know, me and you are having a conversation right now. You're in Australia, I'm in England. It seems to be going fine. There doesn't seem to be any issues. You didn't have to go, you know, you didn't have to hop on a plane and go to Beijing, and I didn't have to go to London. So are we a little bit beyond the need for these stupid cultural hubs where we can actually just look for people who produce great work as opposed to look for people dependent on location?
Yeah, I think like you can definitely, you know, discover new people in that way. But like in terms of, you know, like I'm not thinking that like Gucci are going to call me tomorrow and like fly me to Italy or something to do a shoot because they liked my work. Like at the end of the day, I am where I am. Like I'm like a long way away from everywhere else and where all that stuff sort of happens. And like I'm kind of fine with that as well. Like in Australia, like, or in Perth. So Perth is in Western Australia for people who don't know, and it's really far away from the rest of Australia. People think of like Sydney and Melbourne and all that sort of stuff. Most people who are sort of on the rise around here would normally the next step, and this is probably similar to America and out LA and whatever, the next step is to like relocate to that spot, you know, like relocate to Sydney or relocate to Melbourne or something like that. And I thought for a while, like, you know, maybe I'd do that, but like now I'm just, especially after all the like stuff that's happened in the last year, we're COVID free over here. So we're just chilling and going to the beach and yeah, everything's a bit slow now, but I kind of like it. And I think I'm going to just keep it that way. But yeah, no, I think, we can definitely discover new people for sure. And like, you know, look, if by some strange stretch the YouTube thing took off or something, or like selling prints or something like that, it could become a sustainable income. But I think that's like relative to saying maybe I'll become a rock star or like, you know what I mean? Like it's probably not going to happen. Like don't plan for that because, you know, it's probably not a good idea.
Well, that's exactly my philosophy. With my wife hates this, but I always say that pessimists are actually optimists when you think about it, because when you're an optimist, you're just constantly disappointed. But if you're a pessimist, everything's a bonus. So you're always being cheered up. And as a consummate pessimist on my part, I always feel like I've got to speak up for those of us that expect the worst and enjoy whatever else we get from it.
Yeah, I'm just like, as far as photography goes, and it was the same like with music stuff as well. I was like, let's just make stuff we like, do things we like. And if someone eventually says, hey, I want to pay you for it, then that's awesome. And if that happens to the point where you don't have to work at your day job anymore, that's also cool. But don't, like, for lack of a better term, quit your day job. You know what I mean? Like, you got to take it in steps and stuff. But I think once I sort of accepted that I was like happy to do photography for me, it's a lot more. You're not doing work based on what you think might get you more work, or doing work based on what you think people might like or whatever. Because if you do that, you're always going to be behind, because like you'll see a trend and you'll start doing it, and then the next trend will already be there. So like, there's no point in doing that.
You mentioned music earlier, and a really quick question. I apologize if this seems like a bit of a pretentious question, but what does photography give you personally in terms of enjoyment or fulfillment? What does it give you different from music?
That's a good question, actually, because they're both like, collaborative, and they're both creative and that sort of thing. I don't know. Let me think about that. I think I kind of just grew out of music a little bit. It's a similar sort of creative satisfaction, I guess, but it's weird because I'm not a gear person, if you hadn't noticed already, but like when it comes to obviously I own some cameras and that sort of stuff, but if someone's like, oh, show me how to lock the mirror up or whatever, like I don't know how to do that. But I'm just like, is this camera like going to give me a cool like result, a sharp photo with it's got aperture and all that sort of stuff, manual camera, it doesn't matter. But the same was with music. Like I was not really too fussed about like good equipment or anything like that. It just comes down to like what you produce at the end of it and if you like it or not. And it's a similar sort of satisfaction, I guess. In shooting photos, it's a little bit more of a delayed satisfaction, because with music, you're hearing it straight away. With film photography, I guess you're not seeing it until a period of time later. Right. But I still get that like excitement. Like I just before we dialed this in today, I just walked in the door and I've just picked up some negatives from a shoot 2 days ago, and I still have to scan them, so I haven't seen them yet. But just that feeling of like getting the negatives back, I'm like, oh, I'm like excited to like put these into the scanner and see what's there.
Well, now I feel bad. I've held you back from looking through your negatives.
No, that's fine. But yeah, no, it's a similar sort of thing, and I also think I really enjoy the process. I think a little bit more than making music. With making music, it's sort of I could do it for an hour, maybe 2 hours or whatever. But with photography, like I'll just spend so much time, like and on my own as well. Like I can be a bit of an introvert. I've had a couple of different music projects, and some of them were working on my own. But with photography, like in terms of like the getting the negatives, the scanning the negatives, the spotting out dust or whatever, shooting a Polaroid or whatever, like, I don't know, it's a very sort of introverted sort of experience for me, and I just really like it. Yeah, it's really nice.
So I've got a question that was number 2 on my list, and I've kind of danced around it because I feel like it's one of those questions that I think everyone would dread if they knew it was coming, because they would have to really overthink it. And I've been trying to think of the best way to put this in. Basically, I think that the way that someone sees, the way you see yourself in the mirror is different to the way that people see you. The way that you see your work, because you have a personal attachment to when photos were taken, is different to the way people that haven't got that personal attachment. Yesterday I watched I'm having a bit of a movie binge at the moment on stuff that I haven't previously watched that I should have done, and I watched Black Swan, and I was having a conversation with someone about the fact that Natalie Portman won the Oscar for it, and they said, well, she actually learned ballet and put a load of her own money and time into the production of that film. And to me, if I have to be told that, then it obviously didn't. It shouldn't influence the end product. The end product is what it is, and you shouldn't need the additional information to tell you that, if you know what I mean. Like, you shouldn't win an award for something that you can't see within the borders of the film. It's just an interesting way that sort of people outside and emotionally detached from something completely view something differently from people that were right in the thick of it and were there at the time it was being created and so on. So with that said, I've delayed this as long as I humanly can. How would you describe the end product, your actual photos? How would you describe your style?
I've been trying to have a style for so long. I don't really know what it is. I know where I want it to get to, but I don't feel like I'm there yet. And I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I want my photos to look like they're still from like a film. Oh, it sounds hell wanky, but like a film that's like, like a film that's never been made or will never be made. You know what I mean? But it could be from a film or something. But it's something that I'm trying to get to, but I don't feel like I've gotten there yet. At the minute, I'd say people would probably just say I'm a portraiture person, artist, or whatever. That, you know, I guess people have used the word dreamy a lot, that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know.
Is there a word that's used about your work? Like, is there a word of description that's used that you feel like completely doesn't describe it from your perspective?
To be honest, I don't know who really talks about my work. Like, people haven't really spoken to me about it. Usually when I work with someone, they just say if they like it or not. But like, that's really where it stops and starts. But yeah, people have said like dreamy and that sort of stuff. But it's weird because like my photos, like I only recently changed something in my Instagram bio to say that I shoot film and Polaroid. Before, I didn't even say that I shot film because I thought it was kind of like not relevant. But I guess now that I have this YouTube channel, I was like, it's kind of about that. So maybe I'll put that in there. But I don't want to be like this film photographer, you know what I mean? Like right. the cliche film photographer, and especially not the cliche like YouTube film photographer. But yes, I know what I don't want to be, but I know where I want to get my photos to. But I think I've just been a bit slack for about the last year. But I posted 2 things on Instagram this week, so that's a step forward. And I like now I've just kind of decided. I don't know if I can swear. I think I've been swearing a lot.
You go for it
because I'm Australian. But yeah, like I recently was just kind of like, fuck it, you know. Like I was overthinking about what to post on Instagram or whatever. But I think starting the YouTube channel really like broke that wall down for me, because I was like, that's like me on there like talking to a camera. Like that's like as embarrassed as I'll probably ever get. So like Instagram can't do any worse than that. So I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to post whatever. And I don't know, I don't really care if people like it or not, but you know, I just don't want to be that like that film photographer that like walks around like and takes photos of like shoes hanging from power lines and stuff. And yeah, like the typical study beats sort of guy. Like I just
right.
think, yeah, I'm trying to steer clear of that. And it used to be easy because there was no real like film photographer thing when I first started shooting. But
well, there was an amazing like parody YouTube video for the beginning of 2021, and I can't actually remember the name of the channel. I remember commenting on the guy's video and saying this is the best video I've seen in a long time. And basically it's this fella that turns up at his studio, unlocks the door, rolls down the paper, gets out the expensive camera, gets out the tripod, connects it all up, gets all of the lights on, shows him setting, like literally it's like beat for beat, shows him setting everything up. And then he sits down in front of the camera and he goes, here's why it's not all about the gear. And it's like the most perfect parody of what most of like the digital side of YouTube is. And I actually got thinking, like, I feel like I've got a good parody of film photography on YouTube, potentially, which would just be like randomly walking around, taking pictures on the point and shoot of stuff that is just completely meaningless, but people will pretend to find an interpretation for it. And then I'll have like a nice lo-fi beat underneath, because you can't take a film photo without a lo-fi beat.
Oh, the lo-fi beat thing drives me nuts. Hey, like I try not to shit on it because like even YouTubers that I like really like use it. You know, like I think you've done a podcast with Grainy Days. I like love him. He's amazing. And one of his intros was like, welcome to like study beats to shoot film to, or something.
Right.
I was like, that's so funny. But I've like made an effort in my YouTube videos to put like funk in and like jazz and like, because the websites with like the right free music, they give you heaps of options. So I was like, well, I'm not going to use like study beats. But at the same time, I was like, maybe people won't want to watch it then, like, because it's different.
It's a vital ingredient.
Yeah. I was like, maybe I'll like people, because study beats are easy. That's why they're study beats. Anyone can like do something else while listening to it, I guess. But if you put like funk in, I was worried people might be like, I don't like funk music. I'm not watching this. But then I was just like, no, well, I'm just going to put it in because I like it. And then people have been commenting actually saying, who's this band and that sort of thing. So that was cool.
I remember the first time I put a rock intro on one of the podcasts and I got about 5 or 6 people message me just saying, really like the music. It's like, yeah, I didn't do that part. If you want to talk about the podcast, I was definitely involved in that process. But yeah, the music's great. Thanks. So I guess some people are just relieved to not be hearing the lo-fi beats for a change.
The first 3 videos on my channel. So the first video I ever made, which I don't even talk in, I just videoed me shooting some Polaroids at the beach. And I didn't even know how to edit video or anything yet. This is only like 3 months ago, but I had like iMovie on my computer and I didn't have any music. So I just grabbed one of my own songs. One of my own songs is in that first one. And then the next 2, I messaged my mate and was like, hey, because he plays acoustic guitar tracks. I was like, can I use your music in my video? And he was like, yeah, that's cool. And people were messaging saying, you know, who's this band and that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, that's like, this is kind of maybe a good idea, you know? And then moving forward, I went to one of those like rights-free sort of websites because honestly, because the production of my videos is so shit, I was like, I'm probably going to try and find some like pretty high production music to balance it out.
The old expression is that people can put up with bad video, but they can't put up with bad audio.
Yeah, that's why I was like, as long as I put nice music in, it'll cover up the fact that like I have no idea what I'm doing with this digital camera. And yeah, it seems to have worked. I think I've got like 90 something subscribers.
We're going to at least double that. I'm going to make sure that at least doubles. I'm going to start pressuring people because at the end of the day, I want to see, you know, more than the same 5 people just appear over and over again. I'm even at the point where if I watch a YouTube video of a really specific, like I'll watch one of yours and the next one it wants to take me to is something that's got 3 million views that was by one of those 5 people. It's like, why would you not keep me on the same line that I'm currently on? Why would you immediately divert back to something that already has a ton of views? Like you're not spreading, like the channel won't, sorry, not the channel, but the website won't do well. And I'm obviously talking complete bollocks here because it's not like YouTube's struggling, but it won't continue to grow if you know, every avenue takes you back down the same dead end. So it'd just be nice to see some variety. We need to wrap up because I feel like I've taken up way too much of your time on this. Let's just do a quick 2-part question and then we'll move towards the end.
Go for it.
You've kind of touched on a few bits of this over the course of this, but let's really define it. What do you feel like your biggest strength and weakness is as a photographer?
Strengths is hard to say without sounding like arrogant, but I think a strength of mine is that I can go into a shoot or something and kind of, I don't know how to say this, like look at things from a slightly different angle, I guess.
Right.
I kind of like really, if it's say like on location or something, which most of them are, I'll kind of really like analyze the space before I sort of start shooting. Like sometimes I'll just stand there for a little while and trying to sort of put pictures together in my head or scenes together in my head before I'll start shooting. Whereas like when I've watched other people shoot, I guess they usually will just say that's a nice flower or something and let's just go over there and we'll just start taking photos kind of thing. So I guess, I try to bring a different sort of perspective and look to the photos that I make. I don't know if that shows or not, but and also I'm trying to create photos that are somewhat timeless. So like, and I don't mean that in like a vintage filmy sort of way. I just mean like I don't put timestamps in my photos.
Yeah.
So you won't ever see anyone with like an iPhone, or you won't see many like buildings that you can tell like when they were built or anything like that. I try to keep it very timeless, I guess.
Yeah. No, I get what you mean. I've got a big thing about cars. I don't like cars being in photos because it really dates the image.
Yeah, especially like, I don't know, again, we could go on about this, but like vintage cars look cool, but were they cool when they were new, you know?
Right.
But a weakness of mine, I think, is like, I just don't really like gear, and I don't spend time like learning about, I feel like I don't optimize my gear or optimize the technology I have available. And it's something I'm like working on, especially like with the YouTube thing as well, is trying to become a little bit more like finger on the button on the internet, and like posting things and sharing things and getting better at shooting with a digital camera and just being more like present, I guess. I'm usually just like off in my own world. Like I take photos and I scan them and they're on my computer, and then I just don't show anyone and don't tell anyone. So I'm really trying to like be better at that. My girlfriend's been a huge help as well, because she was sort of like, hey, let's put together a shoot with this model, and I'll style and we'll work on it. And so she's giving me a bit of a nudge, which is awesome as well. But yeah, that's definitely something I'm trying to get better at. And that's why I'm stoked about being on the podcast as well. I appreciate you having me on here. And that should give me a little nudge as well to keep staying on the internet and sharing my pictures.
Well, with that said, let's annoy some people into going and following you and finding someone new and exciting to watch on YouTube. So this is the most important part. All of the stuff we've done before, this is completely irrelevant and completely disposed. I'm joking. It's not that bad. But this is the most important part. We need to tell people where they can go to find you. So Instagram, YouTube, website, whatever you want to plug, please plug away.
So my Instagram is called Stapled Together, which is just one word. And that's because my surname is Stapley. And someone that I lived with once said my life is like a sitcom, and he wants to write a show about me called Stapled Together. So that was why that became my Instagram name. And then the YouTube is just the same name, Stapled Together, but I don't know why, but you can't really find it if you search for it. So maybe just go to my Instagram, and I've got a link on there to the YouTube channel. And
I'll also be linking it on the podcast underneath. So massive thank you for taking the time out of your evening, which is my morning, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around, even though I've phoned Australia multiple times. A massive thank you for taking the time to do this. It's been great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.